In 1789, the social fabric of Europe was thrown into chaos and disorder by the commencement of the French Revolution, during which the people of France rose up against their king and oppressive nobility, demanding their voices be heard. Within 3 years, the monarchies of Europe were at war with revolutionary France in what would become the War of the First Coalition. It was during this war that the French monarchy would be abolished, and in its place would rise a new republic, idealizing liberty and fraternal equality. However, as the French Revolutionary Wars raged on, a promising young French artillery officer would see his career skyrocket through the ranks of the Revolutionary Army and government until this man, Napoleon Bonaparte, would one day seize the reins of the revolution and subvert it for his own self-interests. Welcome to our video on how Napoleon subverted the French Revolution. We're going to dive into all the details of Napoleon's story, but we also bring you a broader run through the whole tale from today's sponsor, Magellan TV, who feature Napoleon in an episode of their series The Great Commanders. It's an expert retelling of Napoleon's story, laced with analysis of what it was that made him stand out as a commander and what brought him so much success. From his rise amid the French Revolution, to his military conquest of Europe, to his downfall and ultimate knockout at Waterloo, Napoleon remains studied and sometimes idolized to this day as a man who climbed the rungs of power through talent. But perhaps those rungs were also to shatter under his own weight, as his ambition turned his talent into tyranny. Get the full story now over on Magellan TV. Of course, there are also hundreds of other documentaries to watch there, and that's just counting history. There are loads of documentaries on all kinds of topics, all gathered together into one brilliant service, and more are added all the time. So for some high quality history content, or whatever else you want to learn about, use our special link in the description, and Magellan TV will give you a month of access for free. The Corsican-born French army officer Napoleon Bonaparte, who initially signed his name in the Italian fashion of Napoleone de Buonaparte until 1796, was 24 years old when his name first gained the notice of his contemporaries. The young artillery officer's first step in climbing up the social ladder of revolutionary France was not achieved through fighting on the battlefield with sword in hand, but rather by writing with the pen in the office. In 1793, Napoleon wrote a political pamphlet supporting the French Revolution, titled Le Souper de Beaucaire. This pamphlet, which marked his first rise into public relevance, was a narrative dialogue between two travelers in an inn. In this story, two merchants from Marseille attempt to convince their fellow inn guests, a soldier, an artisan from Montpellier, and a citizen of Nemours, how their city is justified in revolting against the revolutionary government in Paris. After a heated back-and-forth argument, the soldier ends the debate by proclaiming that the citizens of Marseille have no justification, whatever their grievances, in throwing their home country into a state of civil strife and chaos in the midst of a war against foreign invaders. The soldier states that any refusal to obey the Jacobin government in Paris in such a trying moment is both treasonous and counter-revolutionary. Through this political pamphlet, Napoleon expressed his open support for the revolution, and directed his opposition towards the pro-monarchist regions of southern France. Napoleon's Le Souper de Beaucaire was by no means a historical groundbreaking work, but it did suit the dire circumstances surrounding revolutionary France at the moment it was written, for he had authored the piece while passing the time in General Jean-Baptiste de Carteau's army, which was operating against pro-Bourbon counter-revolutionaries in southern France. His pamphlet soon gained the attention of a close Bonaparte family friend, Antoine Christophe Salicetti, a fellow Corsican who held influence as a political commissar in the revolutionary government. Salicetti introduced the pamphlet and its author to his friend Augustin Robespierre, brother of the famous Maximilien Robespierre. Augustin appreciated Napoleon's Jacobin tone and pro-revolutionary message, and grew to like the magnetic personality of Napoleon. And before long he was approving of all of the young Corsican's recommendations and ideas, even those policies which clashed with his military superiors. So began Napoleon's rise to prominence, from a lowly and obscure artillery officer to a name with some note and merit in the revolutionary ranks. Through his connections to Salicetti and Robespierre, Napoleon earned an appointment to the staff of General Carteau in the siege of Toulon in late 1793, where he first earned his reputation as a battlefield commander by leading the French Republicans to victory over the British and pro-royalist forces that December. He was hailed as a hero for his role in this victory and was quickly promoted to brigadier general. However, Napoleon's connections to Robespierre were soon cut short, quite literally, when the latter lost his head to the guillotine in 1794 at the end of the Reign of Terror. As a colleague of Robespierre, and having previously been sent on a secret diplomatic mission to Genoa, an enemy of revolutionary France, Napoleon was made a suspect in the Terror and was thrown in jail by none other than his old friend Salicetti, who was trying to save his own head in the aftermath of the coup against Robespierre. Any illusions Napoleon might have had about the ideals of liberty and common brotherhood in the French Republic were now being cast into doubt, with the brigadier now realizing the extent of the corruption and intrigue within the revolutionary government. Nevertheless, Napoleon continued to believe that the revolution was a cause for good within France. Bonaparte was released from prison by his erstwhile friend Salicetti and put to work in the Army of the West, suppressing counter-revolutionary royalist revolts in the Vendée region. For some time, Napoleon actually considered transferring his military services to the Ottoman Empire, having become incredibly disillusioned with the poor management and chaotic administration of the revolutionary armies. By October of 1795, Napoleon was in Paris, working with the Bureau of Topography in the Committee of Public Safety, when a royalist revolt broke out against the ruling National Convention in the streets of Paris. Bonaparte continued to show his loyal convictions to the revolution's cause when he was tasked by convention leader Paul Barras with taking charge of Republican forces in Paris and suppressing the riots. In one of the most notorious acts of his early career, Bonaparte ordered his artillerymen to fire grapeshot from their cannons into the gathered angry mob, violently suppressing the riot in an event that became known as the 13 Vendémiaire. Toulon had built Napoleon's early military reputation, while the 13 Vendémiaire had solidified his political career. Barras and other grateful leaders of the convention, who now formed a new government known as the Directory, hailed Bonaparte as a saviour of the revolution, and before long he was promoted to the rank of General of Division, with command over the exhausted, ill-equipped and underperforming Army of Italy. Napoleon's military career only grew with his string of victories in northern Italy during 1796–97, where he galvanized the demoralized French soldiers under his command and earned a reputation as a fearsome general. His troops even fondly nicknamed him the Little Corporal for sharing in their dangers on the battlefield. With his decisive victory in the Italian campaign, Napoleon single-handedly forced the Austrians to sign a treaty which ended the War of the First Coalition, bringing about a fragile peace in Europe after 5 years of conflict. The people of France revered the victorious general as a hero and saviour. It was here that Napoleon's path to despotism truly began, as he started to realize that he had won the war, not Robespierre, not the Convention, and certainly not the current Directory. He famously remarked privately, "I am only at the beginning of the course I must run. I can no longer obey, I have tasted command, and I cannot give it up." The peace in Europe did not last, and within a year, Napoleon was planning his next campaign against the British in the War of the Second Coalition. He set his sights upon the vast deserts of Egypt, where he saw an opportunity to cut off the British Empire's trade connections to her colony in India. But more than that, Napoleon's campaign in Egypt was to be a scientific and cultural expedition, bringing with him France's best historians and scientists to study the land of the pharaohs and bring back riches and glory to the French people. The campaign would ultimately end in military failure for the French, but politically, Napoleon's expedition had done what he had sought it to do. It served to increase his fame and popularity back home. When Bonaparte returned to France in 1799, he received a hero's welcome. Napoleon reached new heights of fame and glory, while the Directory reached a crisis point. Corruption and greed plagued the Directory, and its legitimacy was cast into doubt, and Napoleon began seeking a way to seize power for himself, to take the reins of the revolution personally. Paris was already seething with political intrigue and backroom deals. He saw that the time had come to make his power play against the revolutionary government. He made a political alliance with a plotter in the Directory, Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, who sought the popular general's support to take power. On November 9, 1799, Napoleon's plot was set in motion. The plan was to force the dissolution of the Directory's legislature, vote in a new parliament, draft a new constitution, and effectively renew the government with a clean slate, with Bonaparte and Sieyès legitimately voted into power by the parliament. Sieyès, through his connections and bribery, would ensure that the other leaders of the Directory would be unable to oppose the motion. Napoleon gained the support of the other senior military generals for his plot, winning them over through bribes or his charm. Napoleon and his plotters believed that force would not be required to get such a resolution through, and they didn't want to be seen as taking power through a military coup. Napoleon relied on the support of his brother Lucien, who had been elected president of the lower house of the legislature, the Council of 500. He hoped that Lucien would be able to sway the legislators to dissolve the government, but the council refused to listen. Deliberations continued inside the chamber as Napoleon and his co-conspirators waited outside with growing impatience. Finally, the young Corsican's patience grew thin, and he entered the building accompanied by a retinue of grenadiers to deliver a fiery speech to each chamber in turn. Although the Council of Ancients relented, the 500 refused to hear him out. The deputies rose from their seats, shouting "Hors la loi" or "outside the law," with some members even drawing daggers on Napoleon. Bonaparte and his grenadiers were driven out of the chamber, and he noticed some of his generals were visibly hesitating on their next move. Had the council declared Napoleon an outlaw, things might have gone differently, but their indecision would prove fatal to their power and the French Revolution as a whole. Drums beat outside as soldiers charged into the chamber accompanied by Napoleon. The deputies began to disperse quickly, many rushing to escape the frenzied scene through the room-level windows. In a quick and decisive coup, Napoleon had effectively dissolved the Directory. With the fall of the Directory, a Consulate was voted into power, in which 3 co-consuls would lead the French Republic: Napoleon, Sieyès, and a co-conspirator, Roger Ducos, later to be replaced by Charles-François Lebrun. But for all intents and purposes, Napoleon had consolidated power for himself as the first consul of the French Republic. Much like the waning years of the Roman Republic, the true revolutionary ideals of liberty and fraternity faded away under the consulate, or rather dictatorship, of Napoleon. He had seen how the various governments and legislatures of revolutionary France had thrown the country into chaos and disarray, and Bonaparte intended to put an end to it by gaining absolute power. Working vigorously from his office in 17-hour workdays, Napoleon oversaw the rapid transformation of France from a republic into a one-man dictatorship. There were some positives out of Napoleon's consulship. He did away with the hectic revolutionary calendar, created a new legal codex known as the Napoleonic Code, the basis for much of modern Europe's legal codes, and also established general order and stability in France. But for all intents and purposes, the French Revolution, or at least the ideals it had birthed, died on November 9, 1799. Most Frenchmen didn't oppose the new consulship, as Napoleon brought stability to a France that had seen nothing but chaos and death for over 10 years. Napoleon went on to win another string of victories over the coalition forces in his second Italian campaign, culminating with the Battle of Marengo in 1800, which solidified Napoleon's status as First Consul of France and ensured the new government's continued stability. Now holding uncontested absolute power over the French people, Napoleon would finally cement his rule over the country in 1804 by holding an election which made him Emperor of the French. Once an idealistic revolutionary like many of his French brethren, Napoleon Bonaparte had subverted the ideals of the French Revolution for his own gains and become the very thing he had originally fought to oppose, an absolute monarch. We hope you enjoyed our video on Napoleon's rise from artillery officer to emperor. We plan to cover the fascinating lives of history's other great leaders in the future, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.